Behind you.
Behind me.
I didn't go this time.
Oh, that's a good one.
There you go. Have Cavill will travel. Morning, everybody. Welcome to all our members. Great to see you all here, and what a great last couple of weeks it's been, particularly for a Collingwood supporter like me. Commiserations to our Lions supporters and such, but it was a great grand final series. It was a terrific series, and I'm glad for once Collingwood, I think we win 1 in 3. That's about the average, and good to win one and get one back after we lost to the Lions. That was a mighty grand final. Was it 2003? 2-3?
Yeah,
anyway.
3, yeah.
They're a wonderful side.
About Collingwood.
What's that, Bertie?
We're not here to talk about.
Oh, rightio. I was about to close the meeting.
Well, I don't want to talk about Essendon yet.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Before I forget, our activities man, Mr. Gary's reminded me that for those who are staying for lunch who haven't put your name down yet, could you please see him and let him know ASAP so he can get the list down to the people downstairs. Okay, thank you. Any apologies today that we're aware of? We'll go through a roll call in a minute anyway, but Gaz?
Yeah, there's John McCarthy's away on holidays, and Frank Henning is not too good today.
Okay, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he may be here, he's not sure.
Yeah, no, Griffiths.
Yes, David.
Then Edwards, medical appointment, could be in later.
Okay, good day.
And Detlef's still having
Detlef, yep.
Ray Radden maybe?
Sorry, who's Matt?
Ray.
Oh, great, yeah. Ron Speechley rang me last night, and he's an apology as well. But, okay. We have any guests today, or visiting members from other Probus clubs? No? Okay.
Geoff Scully is our guest speaker. He's a member of the Probus Club. Essendon. Yeah.
Yeah, he is too. Yeah, thanks, Mick. Birthdays. Birthdays. Yes, Peter.
81 tomorrow.
81 tomorrow. Congratulations to you, mate. And Robert? Yes, Robert? Yep.
I had a birthday.
Oh, yes,
Keith.
Keith.
Birthday.
Your birthday?
21.
Last month,
Last month.
September the 21st.
Fantastic. Well done. How many?
90.
90. The nervous 90s. Robert.
I just wanted to, is this thing working?
Yep.
I just wanted to have a little bit of a talk to you. I won't talk too long. If I tried to cover his whole lifetime, you guys might not be here when it's finished. But the boy I wanted to talk about is sitting up the front up here. And he was born on a special day that I remember when I was young too, and you're all too old, too young to remember, and that's Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes Day was a great night. We used to have lots of fun with crackers and everything like that, and save for it and all the rest of it. Some of you are showing no interest. It looks like you don't know what it was. But never mind. This, the 5th of November.
Have a big bonfire.
Gunpowder, treason and plot.
Catherine Wheels,
So-
Tim Bones.
Back at the shops at Eaglemont.
And we cooked the potatoes at the embers.
Yeah, so all that excitement really applies to this particular man that I'm going to talk about. And his name is Will Semler. He's sitting up the front here. He's been a member since I got his application form here, when he became a member, right back in something like 84. No, 85, I think. No, where is it? You'd think I'd be prepared, I apologise for that. Anyway, a long time ago. He's actually the oldest serving member still here.
Well done.
And while that's very important to us to be a member of our Probus Club, another very much more important date is coming up on the 5th of November. And we've got a new king, King Charles III. And I'm very hopeful that he's in the picture and he knows what the hell has to be done. And that is, send a message to Will. Will turn 100 years old on the 5th of November. One day, if we have the time, we might have a members' corner from Will, because over 100 years is quite a story to tell. But I won't go into enormous detail. I've got his first application form here, where he joined the Probus Club. He's been coming here How many years, Will, have you got any idea?
Ever since.
Forever almost, yes. Anyway, no, that's it. Sorry, gentlemen, I should be organised for this, but I can't find the date of this thing. So, no, can't find it. Anyway, it's a very long time. He's the longest serving member. So, I just wanted to mention that. It's coming up on the 5th of November, and I hope you remember him and give him a few cheers at that time.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, indeed, we certainly will, Rob. By my maths, and it makes you about a 38-year member, Will. So looking forward to carrying you back to 50. Let's hope. All right. So, okay. Next item on the agenda is our roll call. So, Mick, I invite you to do the roll call for us, please. Thank you.
Rob Adams,
Apology.
Peter Bedford, here. Noel Benton, Bert Berryman,
Yes.
Bruce Bazant,
Yes.
Hector Davis,
Apology for that.
Michael Doherty,
Apology.
John Doherty here, Len Edwards,
Medical appointment.
Apology.
Bert Backer,
Yeah.
Alan Evans,
Present.
Brian Fitt,
Present.
me, Bob Frenchman,
Apology.
Noel Griffith,
Apology.
Stuart Hall,
Apology.
Bob Hill,
Apology.
Detlef Hingst,
Apology.
John Horsfall, Reg Jackson,
Here.
David Jones here, David Lutton,
Present.
Jerry Mazzoletti, Brian McMahon, Gary Nervo, Gary Packworth here,
Yep.
an apology, Kevin Ryan,
Yes.
Will Sandler.
Apology for being here.
Good job. Joel Stiles here, David Taylor,
Yeah,
Yep,
David.
present.
Les Sterling,
Present.
Keith Tupper,
Present.
Livio Chirasek,
Yes.
Andy Walsh here, Lee Williamson,
Present.
Jones-Parry Jones,
Yes, present.
Joe Landsberg,
Yep.
Phil Carter, Ron Speechley,
Apology.
Apology. Yep.
Dinah Landsberg, Tim Landsberg. So we're guests,
Yes.
Oh, okay. Right. Thank you, Mr. President.
And Len Edwards. Good to see you, Len.
Yeah, it's just
Good on you, well done.
Len's just walked in.
Okay, thank you, Mick. The minutes of the last meeting have been circulated by a secretary. Are there any suggested amendments or alterations that need to be made to those?
We'll do that in committee.
Pardon?
We'll do that in committee, I think.
Are we?
We'll do it in committee, all of that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Reports. What are you on your feet, Cole?
Okay, right. The book club's going in its next round, so those with books could pass them on, that'd be lovely. If you haven't quite read it, if you can just sort of pass it on to the home of the person. Other thing I'll comment on is that the Probus Central Committee have rethought out the Constitution. It's not a major review, that'll be discussed in committee this coming Monday. I need to congratulate David Jones for being our Golfer of the Year, winning the Eric Carter Trophy. Congratulations. The trophy's been engraved with his name, and I'll be along to the committee meeting next, which is being done today, next week. Okay, I hope you all had a look at the Indonesian calling of Indonesia Panggilan. It's a very interesting little short movie you can get up on the internet. via instructions in the newsletter, it's worth a look and historically significant. I know that the Waterside Unions had a fair bit of communist influence. This actually is good behaviour by Australians to Indonesians. Okay, and the final thing is, that's it, that's enough. Good luck with all of that, thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Bertie, Mr Treasurer.
Right, cash at the bank, $12.64. We spent $27 during the month. And petty cash unchanged at $139.
Things are very stable.
Yep.
Good. Excellent. David Lung, Almo.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, David.
I spoke to Bob Hill on Sunday.
Yep.
His only disability is his balance. That's the nature of the stroke.
Right.
But he is improving. Gets around on a frame. Has been out to restaurants. Not able to come today, unfortunately. He is about to visit his home town of Jones-Parry for a gathering there.
Right.
So look, he's doing well and he's in good spirits.
That's good.
And the other Sunday I also spoke to Pat Griffith, and Noel's really not very well. The story is that he toppled over at home and ended up in hospital. He had pneumonia, which was serious for him, and then got COVID while he was in the Austin.
Oh dear.
As did Pat. Yeah. Anyway, Pat's doing well, but Noel is not going so well. His main problem is his back. He's got a crushed lumbar vertebra. Pat seems to think it happened during his fall, but quite likely to be an old one. It doesn't matter really because it's causing quite a deal of pain.
Yep.
He'd love to be here, but it's not possible at the moment. And we do wish him well. He is struggling at the moment.
Yep.
I think that's all for the moment.
All right. Thanks, David. But you'd be good enough to pass on to Bob and also to Pat and Noel our best wishes of speedy recovery and in our thoughts and prayers and such.
I'll do that.
Thank you. Mr. Activities. Yeah, thank you.
Morning, everybody. Can you all hear me? Okay, I'll talk into the microphone. Okay. I've just come back from Mount Gambier. I've just had 5 days over there. Got right back on Saturday. We had a great time there. It was a really good trip. I was the only one from the club here. There was 13 persons on board the trip. I don't know how they can run it at 13 persons. And they all come from Templestowe Central. There's no one from anywhere else. So it was a really good trip. No, it was excellent. We had a little bit of rain, but it was fine. It was really, really great. Tuesday, October the 24th was our bus trip to the Yarra Valley, but it's been cancelled. I think you've probably read it in the newsletter. I got 9 people from 3 clubs to go, and I can't run it on nine people when you got to pay $650 for a bus. So it's just hopeless, you can't do it. So I had to cancel it. So this month we've got nothing on at the moment. For November, Tuesday the 28th, we're going to have lunch at Scintilla down in Heidelberg in Burgundy Street, 131 Burgundy Street, Heidelberg. The time is 12:30 p.m. The parking is at Leo's Supermarket and walk through the side lane to the cafe. Please start putting your names on the list this morning so that we can get it. Now, another thing they're bringing up, and this is most important, is December, Wednesday the 6th. We're joining Rosanna Ladies Probus for Christmas lunch at Bolera's Receptions at 1435 Main Road, Eltham. The time arriving there is after 11:30 a.m. for lunch around about 12:30. The cost is $50 per person. Please start putting your names on the list. The list is around the corner there to put your names on the list for the meeting, and that'll be our outing for November. The money has to be paid at November meeting in an envelope for the outing, and the outing on there, and name and number on the front, please. Also, I will put it in the newsletter. You can send the mail the money direct to Rosanna Lady's Probus bank account. I'll put that in the newsletter when we get it for November. Okay. Info for the new year. Group Link are running a 9-day trip on the Murray Princess on May 23. I have the pamphlets up there on the counter if anybody's interested in them to go if you want to. The price is on the information there of what it is, and I hope people are going to go on it. It's quite a good trip, I believe. Also, I'd like to bring up this morning too, again, I think I'll put it in the newsletter, in regards to putting your names on the lists for the meals at the next meeting. Please don't forget to do it. It helps the kitchen and staff downstairs to know how many people are there. At the moment, I don't know whether everybody knows, there's no manager here at the moment. The girls downstairs are running the business at the moment. They haven't got a manager. Simon's gone, the guy that was here. If you're coming and want a meal, ring me if you haven't put your name down, and I'll put your name on the list at least 5 days before you're going to come, okay? And that's all I've got for this morning. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gaz. Fulsome as usual. All right, well, that leads us into our Members' Corner, and I'd like to welcome Jones-Parry Jones to the microphone for his presentation this morning. Been looking forward to this, given we've got a voice referendum on Saturday, and I think what John's about to talk about might in some way parallel the thoughts of some people at the moment. So welcome to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Put it around his neck. Put that around his neck.
Yeah, it's a noose, is it? Put around my neck.
This is your Brownlow medal, one.
Thanks,
There
mate.
you go. You won by one vote. Welcome to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, let's get through these again. You've seen all the slides, so there you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Righto, well, I better get started. I might as well say before we start, this is a timely presentation, but it has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening on Saturday, okay? I'm not trying to influence you or do anything at all. I want to tell you what's happened in my country. So, there's a hell of a lot of stuff around here, isn't there? Well, I'm going to first of all start talking about my earlier days and the attitudes that were around in those times, and that's the late 60s, early 70s, and then a bit of New Zealand history, and finally what's happening there today. It's all, you'll be overjoyed to know, extremely briefly. First of all, I'm going to set the Aotearoa New Zealand scene, especially as it relates to other UK colonised countries. So, first of all, when the British came to New Zealand, they came with better intentions than they had exhibited in other countries. And in New Zealand, distance is not an issue, as it may be here, as it may have been in Canada. Thus, Maori are not out there, maybe 1,000 kilometres away, they're right here. Possibly our neighbours and possibly in our own families. Very likely now to be in our own families. Is there racism in New Zealand? Yes. It's alive and it's kicking. Is there institutional racism? Yes. Is it deeply rooted, as it may be in some other countries? Yes. In places and in individuals. But generally, it's not. And I believe it's declining as New Zealand builds a nation inclusive of its First Peoples and of all others. Why not? New Zealand has been able to build respect between Māori and other groups so that a difficult but ongoing dialogue is continuing. So it's not easy. but it is getting easier. We've come a long way. When I was a young adult, probably about 20, 25, there were rumours that Māori were having manoeuvres on the 90 Mile Beach, which is a very remote beach way up in the north of the North Island, that their representatives have been to Libya and they had been schooled in terrorism. That does happen a little bit now, but we have a very good Secret Service. My own experience, I was born in a white area. In my primary school, of about 450 children, there was one Maori family. Now, I just want to show you, first of all, before we get there, this is the coat of arms. And as you can see, from 1911, when a version of this coat of arms first was instituted, before that it was all British, Māori have been centre and forefront of the New Zealand government's thinking. So that was in 1911. This particular version was changed slightly because one of the Prime Ministers, John Marshall, felt that the woman on the left was far too much like a Soviet heroine, and he admired Grace Kelly, so he had the artist do a Grace Kelly impression. All right. Now, my grandfather was fluent in Māori. He had to be. He was a land surveyor and he often needed to negotiate with Māori landowners. We were always reminded as children to treat everybody with respect. So we called the adults Mr. and Mrs., whoever they were, and we were always on our best behaviour. And I have a really early memory, I was about 6 years old, of going to a traditional Māori haangi, which is a meal made under the ground, hot stones covered with sacking and big leaves, and it is delicious.
Right.
I went there with my grandparents, who were the guests of honour, and I felt in my 6-year-old sense of responsibility, the first child, that I had to thank the lady in charge of the cooking, Mrs. Paul. So I went up to her and very formally thanked her very, very much for a delicious meal, Mrs. Paul. And she was highly delighted and very nice to me. Now, the point about this is that we kids knew our place, and it wasn't at the bottom. So this notion of innate superiority came tumbling down when I went to work in my first teaching position at a large and largely Māori school in the Upper North Island. Now, I learned so much from my Māori colleagues. I also remember after I'd been working there for maybe a year, for the first time, I remembered thinking I was working and socialising with Māori people without registering that they were Māori. They were equals and they were good friends. However, that wasn't the norm in the New Zealand society of around 1969-71, and in those days the Treaty of Waitangi wasn't widely respected at all. But we have come a hell of a long way. And how did we do it? Simply, really, at the core of it, by trying to develop more respect for our First Peoples in the community, and by giving Māori the financial and other resources to develop respect in themselves. Are we there yet? No. Now I think it's about time to change this. So the modern changes started in the 80s when there was a determined push by David Long's government to re-establish the Treaty of Waitangi as the founding document. He was a formidable debater and a speaker and was instrumental in laying a really, really strong base for the comeback of the treaty. So the treaty has 4 principles: partnership with the government, participation with the government, and protection from the government. And those are the principles, really in a nutshell, that underlie the treaty today. Oops. This is a picture depicting the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi in the Bay of Islands at Waitangi in February 1840, and you can see armed British soldiers and you can see armed Maori soldiers. Everybody's there is quite well armed, and I think that is quite nice to be able to say that they trusted them that much. Captain William Hobson was appointed Lieutenant Governor and given responsibility for securing the British sovereignty over New Zealand by the negotiation of this treaty. Now, you'll notice that Hobson's title was Lieutenant Governor. That implies he was reporting to another governor. And that governor most probably was the Governor of New South Wales. New Zealand was part of New South Wales until around about 1840. Now, Normanby, the colonial secretary, gave explicit instructions to Hobson. All dealings with the Aborigines for their lands must be conducted on the same principles of sincerity, justice, and good faith, as must govern your transactions with them for the recognition of Her Majesty's sovereignty in the islands. And nor is this all. They must not be permitted to enter any contracts in which they might be ignorant and unintentional authors of injuries to themselves. You will not, for example, purchase from them any territory, the retention of which by them would be essential or highly conducive to their own comfort, safety, and subsistence. So, good intentions. So why is the Treaty of Waitangi so controversial, even now, among some people in New Zealand? Some Maori were really sold down the road. They were pressured into land deals. The Crown had the right under the treaty to buy all the land, and then sometimes they sold that on to private settlers, but it was occasionally waived and private people could buy land. That happened in Auckland, around the area where I come from, and I'm sure my ancestors took advantage of that. Then came along Sir James Prendergast. He was the Attorney General, and then he became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Now, in New Zealand, the Supreme Court is just that. It is the Supreme Court, and I think the equivalent in Australia is the High Court. Is that the highest court in the country? Yeah. So this is the Supreme Court, the highest court in New Zealand. And he sat and pronounced on a particular case that had wide ramifications. It was called the Wiparata case. It involved a block of land near Wellington, Porirua, which the tribe Ngāti Toa had given to the Anglican Church. And it gave that to the Anglican Church on the understanding that the Anglican Church would buy a school, would build a school. That school was never built, and later the Crown issued the Anglican Church a grant to the land. Now, Prendergast ruled that the courts lacked the ability to consider claims based on Aboriginal or native title because the Maori disagreed with what had happened. Prendergast regarded the treaty as worthless because it had been signed between a civilised nation and a group of savages who were not capable of signing a treaty. And since the treaty had not been incorporated into domestic law, it was a simple nullity. I've heard that word before. Prendergast's ruling was essentially based on earlier Court of Appeal decisions, and it would be used to justify the alienation of much, much more Maori land. Okay, so now that's the sort of climate that we had in the late 1800s, 1900s. Yet, during that time, in 1867, 7 Māori electorates were devised, and they came in addition to 65 New Zealand electorates. Those electorates are still there despite there being very many attempts to have them removed. They were made permanent in 1867. So, just to bring things almost to a close, New Zealand's public life is influenced by its founding treaty, the Treaty of Waitangi. Its terms and its contemporary meaning are really very sharply contested, but Māori seats in Parliament mean there is a constant voice to make sure that Titiriti, the treaty, is always speaking. It justifies a Maori voice at every level of the policy-making process. Everybody has the same level of opportunity to influence public decisions. The general idea that Maori are present in the political community is really well established at home. There is a distinctive Maori health authority. It makes decisions about how to deliver primary health care, and also there's a distinctive school system which provides Maori education to Maori and anybody else in Maori, te reo Maori exclusively. And language is very visible in place names and street names. And Maori vocabulary is used in newspapers, radio and TV. So, as the child in the back seat of the car asks, "Are we there yet?" The answer is still no. But we are so much better off and so much more secure for starting this journey. Thank you.
That's a great presentation, John. It's we can always learn something every day, I suppose. I've learned a few things today. I didn't realise that back in 1840, all those years ago, that New Zealand was bonded or part of New South Wales. I must have been away from school that day. But no, sincerely, it makes me also wonder if, just food for thought, and just food for thought only, that if the Boy-Sow referendum actually fails on the Saturday, what would be the prospect if there were Indigenous or First Nation electorates established, for example, in the Northern Territory, where Aboriginal people could vote in that electorate, and if not, not a general electorate, so they would actually have that voice. Anyway, just food for thought. Not suggesting it should be, but just makes me wonder, that's all. Okay, so yeah, John, thanks again. That was terrific. Excellent. Look, now our time to invite our Vice President up, Mick Francis. Mick, be good enough to introduce our guest speaker today, Geoff Scully. If you do that for us, Mick, that'd be great. I'll take that off you too. Oh, no. Yeah, thanks. Good man. That was great. Thank you.
Bruce, Geoff's he's happy to go on camera and have it streamed if
Okay,
is that all right? Yep, we'll just keep going. Just keep it going. Is this for me or Geoff?
just for
No, for Geoff.
Geoff, yep.
That's a great one.
Round line middle.
Yep.
Thanks, John. Our guest speaker today is Geoff Scully, who I'll let you tell him. He'll tell you his story. But I first met Geoff in the mid-80s, where courts were one of the many organisations that he needed to work with. And Geoff was the coordinator with organ transplants, which was a new initiative. And the process to get everyone on board was massive, and it required huge cultural change. Courts were one of the many organisations that he needed to work with to enable a complex permission process to be attained before the medical teams performed the actual transplant procedures. Enabling this to occur needed a massive culture change, and Geoff's role was to get everyone on board to enable the work to happen. Sounds pretty simple. This national public awareness program included community service announcements, supportive written material, many and varied public speaking events, plus endless face-to-face meetings, including with various court locations, because in the court system, each judicial officer is independent. And so part of the permission process involved coroners who also controlled bodies as well as permission from families. And we had in Victoria, about 50 coroners. So each of them had the ability to say yay or nay in that process. Geoff also targeted students in that process to bring about that reform. So he targeted year 10 and 11 students as a science selective using videos and workbooks. Please welcome Geoff Scully to share his journey with us today.
Thanks, mate.
I want you to wear that Brownlow medal, mate.
Oh, thanks very much.
And you'll be able to barrack your Collingwood after
Yeah, I just say that. Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's very nice to be here today. Believe it or not, it's 22 years since I left that job, and I haven't spoken publicly since, other than at our own Probers Club. During the time that I worked in that job, we were the pioneers, I guess, 3 of us in Victoria, probably spoke to about 800 to 1,000 groups, whether they professional or public groups of people. My only contact with the law, and I'll talk about that in a little minute, was the coronial system. And some of you I know are lawyers and retired judiciary. I have a friend, John Butler, some of you may know. He retired as a senior Crown Counsel in the state of Victoria. We grew up as kids together in Pascoe Vale. And I'm very proud to let you know that I've got a granddaughter who's had a very difficult life, who's now doing 4th year law in Bangkok. She won a Colombo scholarship. She's had a tough life, and I guess I should say to you before I start, whilst I don't get into the very, very heavy side of what I did, if you do feel a little uncomfortable and you want to exit, that's fine. I won't be offended, all right? I gave a talk one night down in Ocean Grove and on this topic, and next thing the fellow went down, ambulance comes, and I thought I'd better do the right thing on the way home and call in at Geelong Hospital and see how he was going. Anyway, I walked in and he said, mate, it's all right. He said, it wasn't, he said, I just got a bit overwhelmed by the topic, but he said, I had a bug. So I went into work the next morning. My boss was a professor of medicine, and I told Bob what had happened. He said, I think you'd better give up public speaking. That was pretty early in the piece. I don't know how you publicised this talk this morning, but the topic I headed it, don't take your organs to heaven. Heaven knows we need them here. I saw this slogan in San Francisco back in 1990, and I thought this would be a pretty good thing. It was a bumper sticker, and some of you might have seen it. It was floating around. Anyway, we got it sponsored by the Australian Kidney Foundation at the time, and we ran with it. It was a very simple little slogan, effective, but a long way from the reality of my work. A long way. So how did I get into this job? Well, by absolute fluke. I was a middle-level manager. I didn't have a degree. I don't have a degree. I worked in healthcare indirectly. I was a manager of a private hospital before I took this on, and I'd worked in health insurance. That was my background. I'd always had an peripheral interest in medicine, very peripheral, and Anyway, it was 1984, and we're sitting at home one day, and my wife said, "There's a job here for a transplant coordinator at Prince Henry's Hospital. Why don't you apply?" I said, "Oh, don't be silly." I said, "This job will be for a doctor or a nurse." I get an interview. I was working at St V's by this stage, very boring job, very boring, working in the finance department at St Vincent's Hospital. And so I thought, oh well, I'll put in for it. I get an interview. Interviewed by the director, deputy director, nursing manager in a renal unit. I was based in a kidney unit at Prince Henry's. Anyway, I had the interview and I walked out. It was an autumn day and I thought, oh well, they say interviews are good for the soul. Back to the humdrum of work at St V's. And then 6 weeks later, my life did a complete change. I get a call from the deputy director, "Would you like to take on this new position?" "Yeah, I will. I'll do it." It challenged every part of me professionally and personally for the next 16 years. I had no idea what I was getting into. No idea. And there were times where it would have been easy to quit. I'll talk about that later. We had a case that went horribly wrong that finished up in the Health Complaints Tribunal. It was very difficult. A lot of people were backslapping because they knew it could have been them. I'll go through it briefly later with you. Organ donation, not for everyone. Very difficult thing to do for people. Very courageous, very brave. Some of you may have had personal loss involving trauma, and I understand that. And I understand if it is difficult, as I said earlier, if you find this a little tough, by all means leave. There's no problem as far as I'm concerned. It's interesting too, I was thinking actually about doing this talk today. We've had trauma in our own family after I did this job. I saw so much of it. I coordinated 300. The reality of it all was here in Australia, unlike America, we don't have the road trauma. And well, we had the trauma, but we don't have the shootings. For example, places like New York, Chicago, high donation rates because they have a lot of shootings, deaths, and we didn't see that here. So I could get comfortable and I might go 2 weeks. And I used to look after our unit's budget too. My boss was he saw my administrative background. We had a patient pool, I think at that stage, of about 500 people. And we had a budget of about $8 million. So I looked after all that as well as trying to do this. I also did a year of journalism in 1987 with a few coppers and a few other people. And by the end of the year, my wife said, "Who are you?" The grass was 3 feet long. The kids didn't know me, so I had to give it away. But back to work. I also worked out too that in the first 7 years, I worked a year of unpaid overtime. That was okay because we were committed. When we went to America in 1990, our American colleagues were staggered to learn that there was a 54-hour on-call period from Friday night till 8 o'clock Monday morning. We got $37. I laugh about it now. They got $10 an hour US, so they got $540, and we got 37. They would earn, if they had a case, multi-organ donor case, that's heart, lung, liver, kidney donation, they were earning about $2,000 a case because we go to work for a long, long time. Like I'm here today talking to you. This could be a normal day for me. I'd leave, well, eventually it was at Monash, but I could be here talking to you, back to work, get home at 6:30 tonight, go have dinner, go to bed at 10:30, pager goes off. You'd wake up and you think, oh, I hope it's 6 in the morning, it's 11:05. Full on referral, could be, we covered Tasmania as well. I don't know how we did this. I really don't know how we did it for so long, because you've got an army of people now. So, yeah, so it could be 11 o'clock and it's a consultant at the Alfred, or it could be someone, or it could be a consultant in Burnie, Tasmania. This is a story, road trauma, certified brain dead, family are agreeing to organ donation, put it together. Out of bed you get, if it's local, shave, shower. We used to pride ourselves on being within a city hospital within an hour and a half, physically there. What is it, Monday? So say I go to work now, what is it, 11:15. So I hit Alfred at 12 o'clock, that was one of my hospitals, high trauma rate. I'd be lucky to finish work probably by the wee hours of Wednesday morning. 16 years went boom. I don't know where it went. It just flew. But that's a little bit of the space. So anyway, I got that job, and it was really difficult. Like, I remember they used to have nursing in the hospital, education in the hospital. So here I am, 39 I was when I started this job, and I'm sitting with 20-year-olds doing the renal block at Prince Henry's, and trying to learn all about renal medicine because that's where I was based. And I remember one day my boss, who I had dinner with last week, he's a great guy, he's just retired after 55 years of clinical practice. He said to me, "You better come up." He said, "I'm giving a lecture to these third-year students today." So he said, "Come up, sit in the back, just keep it low key." He gets up on the board at one point, he starts doing this diagram, and in his cultured voice, he said, "Now, anyone like to tell me what that is?" No hands go up. Second time, no hands go up. I've been reading some literature and I thought that's a condition called glomerulonephritis. And he said, "Oh," so I put it up in increments. He said, "Yes, Geoff." I said, "Oh, Professor, would that be?" And the look on his face, you know. So we walked back to the unit, back into his ordinary voice, and he said, "How the bloody hell did you know that?" And I said, "If you throw enough mud at the wall, some of it's got to stick." But they were tremendous guys, you know. They were really good guys, all the physicians. We just celebrated, well, they just celebrated the 50 years anniversary of the renal unit at now Monash Medical Centre. But they were great guys. And when I was out in the field, and there'd be many nights where there'd be some clinical implication regarding the deceased donor that I'd have to seek more advice, and I'd ring them. We all love golf. So Mick said, you know, to follow footy, but I don't follow footy, I'm a real dinosaur here, but I'm bloody sure I follow golf. I know golf, I've played it all my life and I love it. And they all play golf, and a lot of them were members of sandbelt courses, so we used to play golf together. But I could ring them, you know, in the middle of the night and say, "Look, can you tell me about da-da-da-da?" And they go, yeah, we'll get them to do this, that, the other. And that's how it was. It was on the job. And they'd ring up at home, a consultant would ring with a referral 3 in the morning, and my wife would say, "Look, just find out what he wants. I'm writing that down, you know, get to the hospital, whatever you have to do." So that's a bit of the background. I'm going to do this in 2 parts because I'm going to tell you some of the funniest stuff that happened, which I couldn't talk about when I was employed by the DHS. All right?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could I ask Bruce, could we have a fractionally more volume, please?
Do you want me to talk up a little bit later? How's that?
That's up to you.
Jeff, could you perhaps talk more into the microphone?
Yeah, I will.
If
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah,
That's going through upstairs.
Yeah, that's all right. How's that? Can you hear that?
Yeah.
I'll talk a bit louder.
Thank you.
It's like eating an ice cream. I used to say to some people at our Provers Club, just imagine you're eating ice cream. Anyway, yeah, so apart from 2 social workers, I was the only one that was non-medical in those early days. Never get in today. Never get a look in. With my background, couldn't get there. What happened before we started, it was not structured in any way, shape or form. Organ donors, solid organ donors then were kidney donors. There was no heart, lung, liver donation occurring in those days. And so how it would be coordinated would be the registrar would get called by ICU, and they were what we call non-beating heart donors. So patients whose hearts had stopped beating, they'd get consent from the family, there'd be a quick transfer to theatre. When we started to talk to theatre staff and ICU staff, because we needed their support, we'd often hear, and these are awful words, but they use the term smash and grab. That's what we inherited when I started to walk out into hospitals. talking to staff, this is who I am, this is what we're going to be doing. And they go, oh yeah? You reckon? You think that's good? So the medical profession were 100% supportive. We had to change that, and that took years. It didn't happen overnight. It took a long time for us to do that. The other thing I think of it too, I mentored a lot of nurses during that 16 years, and a lot of people saw the high flying side of it, like us flying around occasionally in Learjets. We went to Queenstown one night. I've been to Darwin. Very, very, it looked good, but it was pure stress. Pure stress. And I said to them, and I would say it again today, the gold standard for us was that we had to be able to look a family in the eye in the intensive care unit, give them the reassurance that all care and respect was going to be taken with their loved ones, and that they weren't going to be additionally traumatised by the organ retrieval process. And treat these people as you would want your loved ones treated. It wasn't rocket science, but it was gold standard. And you can come out with all the scientific hoo-ha you like, that was the gold standard. Treat them as you would want your own family treated. If I couldn't look them in the eye, and believe me, all of those situations, you're entering a room with people whose lives are never going to be the same again. And we could be there sometimes with them in this tight little room, 3 in the morning, 10 people, every word you said they're glued into. So one wrong word from us was one wrong word too many. We were critiqued by everybody that participated in that referral. ICU directors, medical staff, nursing staff, operating theatre staff would all get a survey. So you're a bit like footy. You're only as good as your last case. If I was off the ball, thank God I never got called into DHS. Thank God. Some people did. Some people left very quickly. It would have been very easy. I'll give you an example of how it went. My daughter was 18, and we were shayaking with a car dealer up in Keilor Road. And my pager goes off. I was the duty coordinator for the weekend, and it was an 18-year-old kid, respiratory arrest, secondary to an asthmatic attack. So I had to jump in the car. My car was always filled with my briefcase, my drugs, whatever I had to carry. And by the time I walked through the doors of the ICU, I had to be on my game, because that's the way it was. So it was very easy. The younger ones sometimes found it very tough to do that, and it was tough. And as I said, you were walking on eggshells every part of the hospital you worked in. So we realised very quickly that there was a lot of work to do, and our association was called ATCA, the Australian Transplant Coordinators Association. So we had a link with New Zealand as well. We did a lot of bloody good things, I've got to tell you. We did things like we put together a national operating theatre protocol, because we had a mix of skills. We had people that had worked in the operating theatre, so they put that together. We put together a manual for intensive care unit across the country too, a national manual with all the criteria for donation. In that was position statements by various religions, and they said, right, Scully, you're a Mick, you can get out there and talk to these people. Wow, was that interesting? I found myself in these rarefied places. I remember, some of you guys that know David de Kretzer, Professor de Kretzer. Well, he used to work above me in the reproduction unit at Monash, and it'd be good morning Professor, and it'd be good morning Geoff, and that'd be about it. Anyway, I didn't know. I'd organised to get to speak to the Anglican Church people, and he said, I can't remember what his title was, but I found myself at Melbourne Uni, Newman College area, into this big room with all of these senior Anglican people, basically putting me under the hammer about our process. I found myself with, so there was the idea of this was The patient's been certified brain dead. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. The family are Theravadain Buddhist. The family, the consultant would raise the issue of organ donation. They turn around and say to the young registrar, what is the position of the Theravadain Buddhists on the giving and receiving of organs? I don't know. So we had to do that, and we collated that. So I got that Guernsey. We also saw a need to recognise donor families, because without them it didn't happen. So we introduced ecumenical Thanksgiving services every year. I don't know what's going on now, so I'm talking to you from my day. We introduced those. We started to survey them about how they were handled, how they perceived the whole thing, the communication back. And so we very quickly realised that these folk were a little bit different. I mean, death is death, I know, but because these families had donated their loved ones' organs, they would either ring me or call me on the death of their on the anniversary of their loved one. How are they going? Sometimes they died. Had to tell the truth. Sometimes they died. Not every transplant was a success. So we developed a rapport with them. What was particularly comforting was that we followed them through their grieving process. We had to have a good working understanding of grief and its associated responses. We did periodic courses, short course on grief counselling. Not that we were grief counsellors, never went into that field, but we certainly had to understand a lot about it, and I do understand a fair bit about it. So we went back to our people, transplant community, and said, look, we need to provide some sort of counselling for these families that need it. Why are they any different? Of course they're different. Their loved one's heart circulating and whatever, blah, 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 their kidneys. Of course they're a different group. When someone dies, as we all know, and we've been through this sadness, the staff say goodbye at the door of the ward, they don't see you again. With organ donation, could have been 3, 4, 5 years. I think the good thing for us was we saw them at the most awful time in their lives, and then following them through a period of time where they remarried or had a child. You know, it was very moving. I can remember I had to interview a family at Geelong Private. This young kid, 18-year-old kid, he hung himself using his belt on a fence nearby. It was funny, Mick, because I don't know why, but we had a disproportionate amount of trauma in that Geelong region, and we did a lot of stats, and I could never work out why. But anyway, I walk in this particular night, and you pick things, and sometimes you find out too much before you got there. I'd always pick the brains of the referring consultant, tell me a bit about the family background, and sometimes you hear too much and think, oh, this may not be right for this family. Well, this particular night, the guy, son was very sullen. There were problems in the family. There were problems obviously between mum and dad, and anyway, they agreed. I followed them for some time, and they had some counselling. Their marriage, they stayed intact, their marriage. And then they rang me they were working towards getting recognition for donor families. And would you believe, they were just ordinary, simple folk. They organised a plaque in the Geelong Botanical Gardens. Dennis Walter officiated on the day with his choir. Very moving stuff. They did all this. And that plaque sits in the Geelong Botanical Gardens to this day. But sometime later, I got a phone call, and it almost sort of makes me feel a bit weepy now, to state that the daughter had their first grandchild. And I said, well, how good is that? You know, there's new life in your family. That's the sort of link we had as coordinators. So, you know, it was pretty involved. Just got to forgive this 77-year-old old fella. Well, just to get onto the legal side of it a bit, there were two, as you can see, there were two parts to our job. There was the public education, professional education, but there was also where we earned our dough, as I've always said, the sharp end, that is coordinating the case. So the Human Tissue Act, I think it's still the same, Mick, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's fairly uniform legislation in all states of Australia. Some subtle variances in it, but it set out very strict guidelines for the retrieving of organs for transplantation. Now, I talked to you about cardiac death before. Back in about 82 or 83, ANZICS, Australian New Zealand Intensive Care Society, came up with brain death criteria. This changed organ transplantation completely. If a patient's certified as brain dead, I'll go into it a little bit. They've got no ability to breathe spontaneously. There are 7 clinical tests that are done to determine that the patient has got irreversible brain damage. And I suppose the thing for lay people, and I was in this position, they disconnect, well, first of all, they have to exclude causes of coma, be they from drug or alcohol ingestion, and an observation for a period of 24 hours. So when those filters are met, there are 7 clinical tests that they would do. Now, the diagnosis of brain death is fairly uniform worldwide, but it was fairly recent, so 83 I think it came in, and these tests are done by 2 clinicians who are clinically independent of each other and not part of the transplant team, which we had to really, really labour in the public arena. For reasons that I'll go through, there'd be a news item, usually coming out of America. We were asked for our loved one's organs, and here they are today, alive and well. Okay, great for us. I'm about to give a talk to 150 people in Rotary. What had happened, and I can tell you in a relaxed way now, patient's been admitted in a coma to A&E. Not brain dead, not meeting the criteria of brain death, all those filters I told you about. One of them is gag reflex. You disconnect the patient from the ventilator for a period of 5 minutes to making sure that they're adequately pre-oxygenated. If you disconnect them, their carbon dioxide level will build up to a level in a healthy individual and tell you to breathe. In an unhealthy, they can't breathe. Right? That's one. They do cerebral angiography on kids, which I always thought should have been probably done in adult population, and I did raise this a few times with very senior consultants like people up at the Austin and what have you. Why don't you do cerebral angiography? The answer that I kept getting was there's slight variation in the anatomy and structures. So I left it at that. But with kids, unfortunately, I didn't have to go there. That's another story too. I didn't have to work at the kids very often. I think I only worked there 3 times in all those years. But yeah, so it was introduced as another way of diagnosing death in patients that have had catastrophic brain hemorrhage. So all these folk that we saw were either brain hemorrhage, stroke, road trauma. And I saw some, as you can appreciate, I saw a lot of senseless deaths over those years. I saw somebody who I worked with in a private hospital. Her daughter was killed. She was standing on the corner of the Fitzroy Junction. A boat and trailer became detached from a car and struck Natalie. Fatal head injury. Came time to walk into the unit and talk to the mum and dad. Ah, Jenny. And I said, do you want me to excuse myself? No, Geoff, I've known you for years. We went through it. They gave consent. I'm not kidding. The people that did this were so courageous. So courageous. I would be sitting, after I'd done the interview, and I'd be collating medical criteria at the desk. They would say their last goodbye, and I'd think, you'd have to drag me out of here, because the deaths were so traumatic, you know, and so sad. And you often saw death might have been the byproduct of a life out of kilter, road trauma. And I remember one night, the family were walking out, but as I've walked out, Peter, I've got their son's eskies in 2 kidneys. Mum and Dad had mockies on. They had split up hostilely in the past, and I thought this young man whose death was road trauma, alcohol related, I thought he's the byproduct of love they once had for each other. How the hell are they going to cope with their grieving? I can tell you now, through our studies with donor families, that those families that had a strong Christian support system and or a good strong family system did infinitely better. Folk like these, you just wondered how they got on, but it was the way it was. So there are 4 parts of that, the Human Tissue Act as far as organ donation goes. This is where you guys probably come into it. So once a patient was certified brain dead, it's a bit of a leap of faith, you know. They had to go, do we raise this with his family or not? Just trying to work out whether they should or they shouldn't. So they did. If they were receptive, they said, we'll get Geoff Scully to come in from the transplant team and talk to you about this. Then we would go through with them in great detail what we were going to do, how we were going to do it. I was there. I was in the operating theatre every case. So I was, you know, I had to give them that reassurance. So we would go through the organs. That's another story. It became a shopping list. It became a shopping list. So we started off with kidney, then we went to heart, lung, and liver. Bob Jones, great guy up the road here, terrific bloke. Spent many nights with Bob. It became a shopping list, and then we were one of 2 units in Australia, and I think still, when I say we, Monash, we did combined kidney pancreas transplants. Only 2, Westmead and us, did them. How am I going for time, guys? All right?
Yeah, cool.
All right, yell out if you're from waffling too much. So it became a shopping list. And then somebody comes along and said, look, we need bone. Right. So you imagine we're talking to the family and they said, what organs are you looking for, Geoff? And I'm going, well, it's heart, in my mind, heart, lung, liver, kidney, whatever, you know. So it became a shopping list. That became difficult for us. We used to try and tell them. Some people wanted tissue for research, like there was a guy at Royal Melbourne wanted pancreatic tissue for research. And we had to sort of say, look, you know, you want to come out the coalface, and it's pretty bloody difficult, this. You know, we're now up to 7 or 8 tissues or organs. Anyway, that's what happened. While I think of this, the coroner's court, I've got to give a quick mention here. Lurch was the boss. What's his name? I've got his name here. I wrote it down. No, David. I know David. David coordinated a funeral, which was a tragic death in our family recently. I still know David. He's a neighbour of mine. No, it was the boss was what's his name? Oh, here we go. Stephen Cordner. Good old Stephen Cordner. He used to put the fear of God up everybody. My colleague facilitated the viewing of the skeletal remains of Carmen Chan. Think about that for a minute. I mean, we thought our job was hard. She was a bloody champion, this woman. She facilitated the viewing of Carmen Chan's skeletal remains. It was a tough place, but this is what I wanted to tell you. We had a group called the Melbourne Transplant Group, made up of physicians and surgeons, and we'd have a monthly meeting and we'd rotate them. So the coroner's court said, well, we're in now, we're running a tissue bank, you better come down here and have a meeting down here. I said, okay. And I was the minute secretary, wearing my administrative hat. I had to do every bloody thing. So I got paged, and there would have been, it's in the consulting room down there, it would have been about 12 people, physicians, surgeons in there. I get paged. There was a little hallway outside the door. I walk out, little hallway, there was a glass door. Here's a photographer photographing a naked woman. I went back in and I wrote on to my boss was alongside me and I said, you're not going to believe this. There's a photographer out there, I don't know what it was, we never found out. I went back to my colleague down at the bank and I said, what was all that about? She said, what are you talking about? She said, I think you might be work stressed. We never found out what that was about. The coroner's court. But we had to liaise with the coroner, of course, and that's where Mick came into the equation. So, so you got certification of brain death, part 1, written consent from the family, specified organs, coronial approval, of course, and we'd have to go to the coroner. And then finally, the Director of the Medical Services would authorise the removal of the specific organs that we had got consent for. Nothing else would happen. So we had a case, and this is early days. I was going to work, and the consultant rang me from our place and said, "We've got a patient here who slid a motorcycle under a tram, yada yada, and come up and talk to his family." It was the most difficult case that I ever experienced for the following reasons. I'll try and keep them abbreviated. There was a Catholic priest, and I'm Catholic, so that didn't worry me overly. I was comfortable with him being there, and he'd been providing support in our hospital throughout the night for the family. And it was a lady who had been a renal nurse, who had left the profession, was now working as a carpenter. And I didn't know at this stage that this priest had worn his welcome out. He'd been supporting them, but he'd got to the stage where he'd worn his welcome out. The supporter for the mother of the deceased young man, and this boy was the only joy in her life, I think, from what I can remember. He was the biggest joy, and here he is dead. Her supporter was a Melbourne Age reporter. And at one point in the interview, and I felt genuine empathy for this woman. I had an 18-year-old daughter at the time. And the mother said, when we started talking about particular organs, she said, "I don't know that these people appreciate the gift they're given." Internally I've gone, oh my goodness, maybe this is not right for you, but just bear in mind, we've got a healthy 18-year-old, multi-organ donor. I've only been in the job relatively 5 minutes, 3 years, so I'm still learning. And he said, if this family gives consent for organ donation, there won't be any post-mortem. First mistake of mine, I'll go back to it. I'll revisit it a little bit later. I thought, where did he get that? So we progress a bit further. She gives consent. The case goes ahead. Lots of problems. The living come before the dead. We kept getting back-ended. Theatre time got later and later and later. Anyway, we went to theatre, and some of his organs were retrieved. Unfortunately, arrested intraoperatively. Anyway, it became a legal case. Now, this is where some of you legal people will be interested in this. I only bring it up for this reason. We applied to the coroner verbally for consent for organ donation. The clerk would go back to the coroner, give the coroner the case detail. He would review it, and on that basis the coroner would come back and give his consent. I verbally requested that there be no post-mortem to the clerk down at the coroner's court that night. I know what I did, and I stood up in court and said it. And he denied it. So the case went ahead. The woman found out, the mother found out that her son had had a post-mortem, lodged a complaint with the Health Complaints Tribunal. It ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. In the end, it eventually went to court. I had a call from a solicitor, and he said, representing the hospital, he said, there was something like 7 or 8 interrogatories. I'm not au fait with the law, but that's as I understood it. And our main concern all the way through leading up to this was we didn't want to have any damage done to the program, the transplant program. The woman that was there that night was a journalist for the Age newspaper, and she started to write about it. And, you know, she wrote regular articles about our practice. And so when it was about to go to court, we said to the solicitor, we can't defend 1 through 6, but we can defend the other 2. Anyway, the problem was that the coroner denied that they'd got the request. I said to my boss later, it was bloody stressful, because our names are in the paper every other day, you know, and it would have been easy to walk away, but we didn't. I said to my boss, do we have to record these requests when we ring the coronial service? Because I said, I know I rang and requested it. I was fulfilling this woman's wishes. The joy of her life is dead. His response was, how many cases have you been involved in so far? And I said something like, I don't know, 45, 50. And he said, well, really, 1 in 50. I said, but Bob, you're not walking through the hospital every day with everyone looking at you saying, did you screw up? You know, people patting on the back, consultants say, you all right, mate? Yeah, I'm all right. You know, I'm 45 or whatever I was at the time, but it would have been easy to bloody quit. Because, you know, our names are in the paper every other day. So this journalist went to the tribunal hearing, which was supposed to be in Canberra, down at Collins Street, THS, and she wrote about it. Breached the confidentiality thing, wrote about the case. Anyway, the rest is history, but I had to give a talk sometime later, and it was a big critical care forum, 300 registrants. And I said to my wife Maureen, leaving that morning, and I can't think of the topic I was talking on, I said, just crossed my mind that this woman, I won't mention her name, may be there, and the deceased mother. And sure enough, and some of the footage was graphic, coroners hit and run, accident stuff, you know, visual stuff. And anyway, I gave my little talk, and question time. You mismanaged my son's case. To this day, I certainly wasn't confrontational, and I can't remember what I said, but I was the last speaker before morning tea, and I had to pass this lady, and the hatred in her eyes, I'll never forget. And I thought, no matter what we did, we didn't kill her son, but that's how tough it was. So that case settled, and it was get everyone in the end. It was get my boss, vascular surgeon, get everyone, you know, bang, bang, bang. And we all got a wrap over the knuckles, and I think she got a cash settlement. But so it gives you an idea. It wasn't straightforward by any means. Anyway, I wasn't going to talk about that, but I suppose it is relevant to talk about today. So, after we got our act together collectively Australia-wide, we made mistakes. That wasn't one. To this day, it wasn't one. But we were criticised for things like not routinely offering viewing of the loved one post-surgery. And we changed our practice overnight because we were getting canned in the media about it. We took advice from appropriate disciplines about whether we should or we shouldn't. The reality was very few people, if they did have a viewing post-surgery, because they'd gone home, they usually had left the hospital to commence their grieving, and they'd gone home. So very few did, but if they did, it was a very brief, sad, emotional time for them, but we changed our practice. So everything wasn't right from day one, you know, and everyone was, you know, sort of on our backs a little bit, and some of it was justified. Yeah, so look, as far as the public education side, I suppose this is because of my administration background. It was a great need to do it, and I had the misfortune to interview a young woman at Western General one night whose husband had fallen off a building. She was 7 months pregnant, and we wanted to make 2 commercials, one on the giving of organs for donation and one on receiving. And I rang her and I said, look, you know, have a think about this. Would you be prepared to break your anonymity? This is what we're going to want to do. And I used a little boy who had a kidney transplant on the other side of the equation down at Royal Children's. And we made these 2 commercials. I was able to get the money, I got it funded through philanthropic bequest. And the commercials were made, they were run throughout Australia. They were running as far away as New Zealand and South Africa. And I guess I never kept a lot of this stuff because I didn't think there'd be a life after it, but they'd be as relevant today as they were when we made them. We used an independent film producer. I think we did the whole project for 80 grand. What is interesting when I was thinking about this talk today, I haven't seen anything like it since now. We did that in the 80s, as well as the operational side of our work. I haven't seen anything comparable to that since we had posters in trams, trades, buses, the whole damn thing. Videos. Unfortunately, the only negative on it all was they were called CSAs, Community Service Announcements, and I was supposed to be run through, well, ABC really. And I'd have to tell you, they got a very ordinary run. And in fact, I rang them a few times and said, come on, you guys, like, you know, give us a break. You know, we need your help. When we were making a commercial, I remember Shane Warne bowled that magnificent ball around Gadding's legs. And I had this in my head, and I thought, we've got to get Shane Warne into this commercial. And I had, like, the voiceover was going to be something like, organ donation bowls over many people, and then show the Gadding, whatever. Anyway, we put it to his management team, and they said, nah, don't think it suits our profile. Fair enough, understood all that. Go forward a little bit, and who was the guy that got King hit? One of the other cricketers? Yeah, David Hooks. That's it. David Hooks. Gosh, and I thought, you know, that's what it takes to convert until you get caught up yourself. But anyway, it didn't happen. But that's the sort of stuff that that I got into, as well as running a budget for our patients. So I was a pretty busy boy for a long, long time, and it was great. On the public education side of it, some funny things happened. You know, I travel everywhere. As I said, I reckon I spoke in, I think I did about 800 talks over the years. I never knocked them back. And I remember I went up to Mildura. Mad, I've left Monash and I've got up there, and it was a talk in I don't know, it was a bowling club or something, right? And like, I want to go to the toilet. I'm bloody tired. I've just virtually driven all the way up from Monash, and I've got in there, and I've just started. No, that's right. There was a heart recipient in the town, and I said, look, you kick it off, because I could be 10 minutes late, whatever, who knows. So she's up, started. So anyway, I get up there, and I'm like, you know, really worn out. And I start the talk, and this dear old lady says, excuse me, are you going to be very long, because we're going to have lunch in a minute? And I said, no, it's fine, it's okay. All good. Did the talk, did the abbreviated talk, jumped in the car, went down the road, although I'm not staying here, jumped out, went down the road, and I think I had my lunch in Irimple or somewhere. But they had no idea. A lot of folk had no idea just as to what was going on. I'll tell you one thing that did happen. I got together with 2 amazing people. This guy walked into my office in the 80s at Prince Henry's, off the street, American. His name was Roy Knudsen. And he said, I want to help you promote transplantation, organ donation. I said, okay, here's the story. He lived in Duluth, Minnesota. He's cooking a barbecue one day, and he hears the Amtrak diesel go by. His neighbour had taken his 2 little boys, aged 4 and 6, for a ride on a tricycle. So Roy hears the siren of the ambulance. One of the boys was killed outright. The neighbour was killed outright, and the little boy became an organ donor. His wife, Mickey, was a physiotherapist, and they were coming to Australia to start a new life. How can I help you promote organ donation? Well, you can imagine, like, I was still pretty new, 3 years, I suppose, or whatever. Anyway, I took the view that I wasn't going to be an impediment to this guy's grieving. If this was going to help him come out on the public speaking trail, I would do it. I would take him. Now, interestingly enough, he developed a profile nationally. And a lot of the medicos that I work with said, hey, look, you know, how far is this guy out post-death of his loved one? And I said, oh, he's 3 years. They were a bit edgy about it. And I said, look, I'm aware of that. I said, if I feel there's anything wrong, naturally I won't involve him. Anyway, he was a great speaker. We also got a young guy involved who had a heart transplant, who married the nurse that had cared for him in the ICU. It's a lovely story, you know. So out we go. We'd go to a Rotary night. Everyone's happy. You know, you guys, some of you guys have been in Rotary, you know what it's like. You know, we're going to have drinks and dinner and whatever. We've got a guest speaker. We go in and I think, I know we're going to change the mood, you know, of this whole bloody meeting. And, which we did. We did. But it started off I was the nuts and bolts, so I'd kick it off. Roy would tell his heart-wrenching story, tears, little tears everywhere in the audience, and the uplifting Tony transplant. Well, it became very fashionable, I guess, or of interest for Rotary clubs, Lions clubs. That's why we were running all around the bloody country. And also, take your heart, put it into this guy, yada, yada, yada. They wanted to know. They wanted to know the Christian implications, the mechanics of it all, da da da. So, the chairman would get up. And he'd have tears in his eyes. Great big 6'4" ruckman for Collingwood. Right? Whatever. And say, and I'd go home and I'd say to Maureen, my wife, I'd say, it's a pity Australia wasn't here tonight. This is the bloody challenge to take our work out of the hospital into the public arena. And that's what happened. Now the outcome of all of that was, so we spoke in lots of different places around the state of Victoria. Roy committed suicide. He finished up, he worked, he got a job on Men's Health, working for, I can talk about these things these days, I couldn't before. He got a job working in Men's Health, committed suicide. Tony died. Tony died, he was 29 when he was transplanted. So he and his wife Tanina had 2 boys. I've lost contact with all of those folk, of course. It's so long since I worked. They were amazing. Their contribution to the program, not me. I was paid. I was just here. I was a paid professional, I guess you'd call me. I was paid. They were sharing their personal life experience with transplantation. And so I remember clearly Melbourne Rotary, which was how we go for time, Mick.
Yeah, we might have to.
Okay, I'll just go through a couple of little. There's a couple I think I want to tell you about. Oh yeah, when they started doing transplant in Western Australia, there's a guy called Tony House, a professor. I went over there, I had to give a talk. I didn't have a lot of experience in these days, and I had to go into the ICUs, Royal Perth, whatever, and all these crusty old consultants are in the back of the room, you know. You weren't wondering how the hell is this all going, you know, and I'm telling them what we did, how we did it, and you know, you just never bloody knew what was going on. But Tony said, look, I've got a meeting with the West Australian Health Minister, I want you there. So I found myself, this little black duck from Victoria, I'm sitting with the West Australian Health Minister. Tony was there to get funding for the liver transplant program in WA, which has been going for yonkers now. For the first time in my life, I said not a single word. I thought, how on earth am I there, sitting here with this esteemed medico, the Minister for Health, but he'd want to be there in case he needed me. Not one word. Corneal transplant. I've got to tell you about this because this is good. How bizarre is this for a job? I'd walk out of our unit at Prince Henry's, down a flight, through the lab, down the staircase to the mortuary. Why? Because I wanted to see if anyone had died overnight that was suitable as a corneal donor. And I think, what a bloody bizarre job I have got. What a bizarre job. But the reality of life was, there were 1,000 people on the corneal waiting transplant list. at the time. Now, people have things like bullous keratopathy, very painful conditions. They transplant the cornea, they can read again. Their life is turned around. So, good old me, down the staircase every morning, I'd go into the mortuary. And this particular day, there were 3 deaths overnight in casualty, unusual for a hospital our side. So, ring the consultant, you know, never knew what sort of reaction you're going to get. Hello, it's Geoff Scully here, the transplant coordinator. So I'm just ringing about those patients, unfortunately, had a bad night last night. Oh yes, dreadful night. He said, so busy. So I said, look, all 3 of those folk are potential corneal donors. Oh. I said, do you have any objection to me going back to them now and asking them? No, he said, no. He said, yeah. He said, I'm sorry. He said, we're just talking about it. I said, no problem. Caring for the family, what have you. All 3 gave consent. 6 corneal transplants, varying in age from whatever, 20 through 70. Positive stuff. So, you know, positive stuff came out of it all. Terrelgan, one night. This is the stuff I couldn't talk about before, Mick. I had to pick up a vascular surgeon from our group. Pretty guy, not an old guy. He used to speak a bit like that. He called me Scully. And I said, look, Terry, we've got to go down to Terrelgan, 63-year-old fellow, kidney retrieval. Yeah, right, pick me up. So I had to pick him up at home. There we go, down to Terrelgan. This is Sunday. So we get down there, do what we had to do. And, oh, there's no registrar. He said, you're going to have to scrub. It's me. You're going to have to scrub, which I did. I also had on that day a pair of pale blue canvas shoes or something.
Excuse me, you're forgetting to talk to the microphone.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm wandering again. Yeah, that's a bad. I know.
I can't hear a thing.
Okay, I'm back there now. Sorry. I'm a bit of a. Yeah.
You need to stay there.
Yeah, I need to stay there. Thank you.
Okay.
See, I'm still getting told what to do. Anyway, so yeah, I had to help him out. Right. It's about 10 o'clock at night. He said, "Where are we going to eat?" I said, "Terrelgan, not a lot of options, Terry. Not a lot of options, mate." I said, "How about McDonald's?" Now, I got to tell you, when I got back into the change room, my canvas shoes were wrecked. Things had seeped through, and we'll leave it at that. So I couldn't use, I had to throw my shoes in the rubbish bin. So we've walked into McDonald's at about 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. Here he is, one of Melbourne's leading vascular surgeons, me, right? No shoes. I said to him, if you gave them 100 guesses, the locals, they'd never pick who we were and what we were there for. That was just the way it was, right?
You look like just one of the locals. I used to live in Latrobe.
Who did?
Me.
Did you really?
Before I went to Geelong.
Anyway, look, I've rabbited it on, so it's time to finish. But yeah, I hope I've given you a pretty good idea of what was involved at my level. Any questions?
Yes. What's the most transplanted organ in your time, Geoff? You have all, is it hearts, lung, kidney?
The most transplanted was kidney, solid organ. We call them solid organ. When Kerry Packer fell off his polo pony, I'm not kidding, within an hour I had a journalist on the phone. Now, don't ask me how they bloody found out who was who in the zoo. I've had this journo on the phone saying, I believe Mr. Packer's getting a heart transplant. He just donated $3 million to upgrade microambulances in. Well, the reality of that was, and I told him, I said, you're not going to quote me on this, but I said the reality is that a fellow of Kerry Packer's size, you know, he would have been 120, 110, 120 kilograms. The average donor weight was about 75 kilograms. So they used to work on a variation of plus or minus 10 or 15 kilograms. I said, the reality of life is you wouldn't get a transplant. But that's the sort of stuff that went on all the time. But yeah, a kidney was the most, and still is. But you know, even today, Kevin Rudd infused a lot of money into the program, and look, it's a lot. The resources they've got today are infinitely greater. ICU own this project now, and so they should, because they drive. If they don't refer patients to the transplants, and I kept telling my people that all over the years, it didn't happen. So that was the reality of it all. But kidney donation was the most common. But the waiting list today, are probably comparable to what they were when I was working all those years ago. Thank you.
Do you ever regret, did you ever regret taking on the role?
No, no, it's a good question because, like, personally, as I said earlier, personally and professionally, I grew so much. I knew this was the bloody challenge of a lifetime, and you know, it certainly was. So I don't regret it. It was the best thing I ever did, and I got into it by accident.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Geoff, just if I could probably just wrap it up quickly. So 1984 transplant coordinator, new area, 16 years in the role. What you've demonstrated, Geoff, you had a great ability to establish and maintain, manage key stakeholder relationships. You were able to gain their trust, which is instrumental in normalising organ transplants, which today is commonplace and people talk about it. And I remember when Geoff first contacted me when I was at Geelong and I was the coordinator for Western Districts in those days, and he had to suddenly establish like a relationship with the coroners and even just commencing a conversation. So it's not like you could tell anyone. It was just getting a conversation happening, and it was interesting that Jones-Parry Jones, what he was saying about having conversations in New Zealand with the Maoris there. Having a conversation, it's not everyone's cup of tea. So, some people, like in courts, we were tellers. We were used to telling people what they needed to do, make decisions. So this was sort of groundbreaking work, and Geoff was excellent in that role. There wasn't a lot of structure. You had to establish the structure. In courts in that era, Geoff talked about the one incident he had where it was a verbal agreement, verbal approval. That happened all the time in courts. That's how it was run. A lot of the discussions you'd have with senior police, you know, commissioners, deputy commissioners, it was all verbal. You trusted each other, and the vast majority of the time, would you say 1 in 45, whatever it was? I was going to say 1 in 100. You never had an issue, and that was the way the organisations run. But Geoff, look, being a change agent is always a challenge, but our community have benefited greatly from the work you've done, and I think our community owes you a great debt, and thank you for that, and congratulations on your talk today. Much appreciated. Please accept this as a small token of our appreciation. Geoff's going to stay for lunch, so he's available to have a chat if anyone wants to chat further. Thanks very much, Geoff.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Thanks, Vic.
You mentioned I spoke to John.
Oh, yes, John.
So you don't,
Oh, yeah.
you're still not down alive.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. I'll see you in a minute.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's Will. Rick, over here.
I've got.
Okay, so just before we break for lunch, I just want to echo my thanks to, thank you. Just echo my thanks to everybody for their attendance today, and particularly we can all learn something from everybody. Certainly I have today from Jones-Parry Jones for his excellent presentation, also Geoff Scully. Seems to me, Geoff, that you're amongst the pioneers of organ transplantation. From a personal perspective, I've been on the receiving end of it. My wife had she had a lung transplant in November 2021, and it's you're at the other end of the process where you're talking to people who are donating, and it's sort of awakened my eyes to what the process has been and what's involved. And I guess from my perspective, it didn't necessarily work for my family, but out of tragedy becomes life and joy. And I think you look back on your career and being part of that, it's a wonderful tribute to your life and what you've offered in terms of your employment and how you help people. So from my perspective, thanks very much indeed for the work that you've done, and your colleagues and the people who continue to do it. Thanks very much. Okay, for those who are staying for lunch and such, let's go and have something to eat. Look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting.